When I look back on the last 2 years of my life, it feels like a blur of emotions, grief, love, responsibility, and hope all woven together. My name is Margaret Anderson, and I live in a quiet neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. I never imagined I would be starting my 70s raising my grandson, but life has a way of bringing both heartbreaking loss and unexpected blessings. It all began on a cold, rainy November evening when I received the call that would change our lives forever. My son David and his wife Emily had been driving home from Seattle after visiting some friends when their car was struck by a truck that had lost control on the slick highway. They didn't survive. My entire body went numb that night. I couldn't even comprehend what the officer on the phone was saying at first. All I could think about was their son, my grandson, Ethan, who was only 14 at the time. The next morning, I drove to Eugene, where they had lived, to bring Ethan back to my home in Portland. He sat silently in the passenger seat, staring out the window. His eyes looked hollow, almost lifeless. My heart broke for him. He had just lost both parents in a single night, and I knew the journey ahead would be long and painful. At first, our days were heavy with silence. Ethan barely spoke, barely ate, and spent most of his time shut in the guest room that had suddenly become his bedroom. I would hear the muffled sounds of him crying at night, and I wished more than anything that I could take away his pain. I remembered what it felt like when my husband, Ethan's grandfather, passed away years ago. But losing both parents as a teenager? That was a wound I couldn't even begin to imagine. I knew I had to be patient. Healing couldn't be rushed. So I started with small things. Every morning, I would knock on his door and gently tell him breakfast was ready. At first, he would come down reluctantly, pushing food around his plate without eating much. I never scolded him. I just sat with him, sipping my coffee, letting him know he wasn't alone. One day, I found one of David's old photo albums in the attic. Inside were pictures of him as a teenager, laughing at the lake, playing baseball, smiling with friends. I placed the album on the dining table, hoping Ethan would notice. When he finally did, he sat down quietly and flipped through the pages. I sat across from him and said softly, "Your dad loved baseball. He used to play shortstop for his high school team." For the first time since the accident, Ethan looked up at me with a spark of curiosity. "Really?" he asked. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That small moment opened a door. Over the next few weeks, I began sharing stories about David and Emily, not just as parents, but as people. I told Ethan about how his father once tried to build a treehouse and fell out of it 3 times before getting it right, and how his mother loved singing in the church choir even though she could never remember the words. Slowly, I saw Ethan's lips curve into a faint smile, and my heart leapt with hope. But grief is not a straight path. Some days, Ethan would retreat back into silence, slamming his door and refusing to eat. Other days, he would break down crying in the middle of dinner. I let him. I didn't try to fix it. I learned that sometimes the best thing I could do was sit beside him and let him cry. Around spring, I encouraged Ethan to join me for a walk in the park. At first, he resisted, but eventually he came along. We walked in silence at first, the fresh air filling the heavy space between us. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "Grandma, do you think Mom and Dad can still see me?" My throat tightened, but I answered honestly, "I don't know for sure, sweetheart. But I believe the love we share never disappears. I think they would want you to keep living and to be happy." He nodded, his eyes wet, and we kept walking. That summer, something remarkable happened. Ethan discovered his dad's old guitar in the basement. David had played casually when he was younger, though not professionally. Ethan picked it up and began strumming aimlessly at first, but soon I noticed him spending more and more time practicing. I signed him up for lessons at a local music shop, and before long, music became his therapy. I could hear melodies floating from his room, sometimes soft and mournful, sometimes bright and full of energy. For the first time since the accident, he seemed alive again. One evening, about a year after the accident, Ethan sat with me on the porch, guitar resting on his lap. "Grandma," he said, "I don't think I'll ever stop missing them. But when I play music, it feels like I can still talk to them." Tears filled my eyes, and I hugged him tightly. That's beautiful, Ethan. Your music is a gift, and it will always connect you to them. As time passed, our bond grew stronger. We celebrated small victories together: his first school concert, the day he made the basketball team, the essay he wrote about resilience that won a school award. Each step reminded me that healing was possible, even after unimaginable loss. Today, Ethan is 16, and though the pain of losing his parents will never fully disappear, he carries their memory with strength and grace. He plays guitar every day, and he's even started writing his own songs. Sometimes, I sit in the living room with a cup of tea, listening to him play, and I feel David and Emily's presence in the notes. I've learned that grief doesn't end. It simply transforms. It becomes part of who we are. And while I would give anything to bring my son and daughter-in-law back, I am deeply grateful for the chance to walk beside Ethan on this journey. Helping him feel alive again has given me purpose, and I know that together, we are keeping David and Emily's love alive in the most powerful way possible. So if there is one message I can share, it's this: even in the darkest moments, love can rebuild what loss has taken. Family, no matter how broken, can still find a way to heal. And sometimes, in helping someone else rediscover life, you rediscover it yourself.